Has the Pacers' run to the potentially the NBA Finals softened the blow from the Cavaliers' postseason loss, and why the Eastern Conference outlook makes for an interesting situation for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and maybe we jump the gun and try to change things up. We'll talk about all those things and more coming up on the latest episode of Courtside with the Cavs on SI. What's up, Cavs fans? It's Spencer German and Spencer Davies back at you here during the offseason, which is underway. It feels weird, Spence. It feels like the season ended like a really, really long time ago, and it really didn't end that long ago. Like we just heard from Koby Altman, obviously early last week. But man, like this last week just feels like it's been very sluggish. It's weird not having Cavs basketball in our lives. I'm sure you feel the same.
It is. I hope you've been enjoying your April. I mean, it's been really cold outside for this time of year. And yeah, it feels like we should be back in, Rocket Arena covering another playoff series. And it's just kind of thrown us a little bit off. Like I went to a concert. I've gone golfing a bunch of times. I've spring cleaned.
You found a way to golf in this weather, huh?
I have. Hey, where there's a will, there is a way when it comes to being on the links, no doubt.
But that's very fair.
It is different. And I've enjoyed watching the NBA playoffs. I was a little disappointed with how the series in the West ended last night with the Wolves and the Thunder. Obviously, OKC coming out and bludgeoning that team and really just kind of burying them in their grave. Hopefully, we see a little bit more fight out of the Knicks against the Pacers. But as we know, Karl Anthony Towns could be out for that game. He's questionable with an injury, so it could be more of the same, and I'm sure that's a good kind of place to leave it for where you want to go with this with the Pacers.
Yeah. Well, and the Thunder's an interesting part of this too, and with you bringing up them, because on one hand you see the Thunder do what they did all season, and they end up in the NBA Finals, which is what we thought the Cavs potentially could do after they, just dominated the Eastern Conference this year, 1 seed, 64 wins, all those things. We thought that these two teams were kind of on a collision course. And so on one hand, there's probably some disappointment in seeing one team in the West do that and complete the job, and the team in the East that did that not finishing the job. But I also think as you look at the Eastern Conference and you look at the team that's most likely to represent the East in the finals, this Indiana Pacers team that you lost to in 5 games, I do wonder, Spence, and I know we try to kind of put our media hat on and not let like the fan perspective influence us in a lot of ways. But I do wonder if like there's any solace for fans in seeing, I know it's hard to turn these games on. Kobe talked about that, right? And watch the teams and be like, well, I feel like the Cavs should be playing, so this is just disappointing to me. I get that. But I do wonder if there's any solace for fans and even I guess the organization to an extent in seeing this Pacers team that beat you do the same exact thing to the Knicks. Like it almost cements that it wasn't this fluke, right? That this Pacers team was really, really good. And in some respects, I'm not saying you and I disrespected the Pacers. Like I think we both felt like that was a really, really good team, that there was a potential mismatch there and in certain areas, and that the Cavs, had to be on their P's and Q's if they were going to win that series. But I do think there was kind of just a general sense of disrespect towards the Pacers just from an NBA coverage perspective, in terms of maybe not thinking they were this good, like that they were an NBA Finals caliber team. And I'm actually now like looking ahead thinking if they do advance past the Knicks, like they actually, I think, could give the Thunder even some trouble, which they've been such a good team this year. And so I just wonder if fans take any solace in that, and it at least softens the blow of that defeat a little bit, a couple weeks removed from them losing that series.
I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag just based on the responses I've gotten on X. I did tweet this out 5 days ago. Maybe instead of looking for every reason in the book as to why the team they played failed, maybe we should finally tip the cap and give the Pacers their just due. It's been 1 month and 3 rounds. So that was kind of my take on it. And then I got quite a few responses from that. A little bit of a mixed bag, like I said. No, the Cavs still played like ass, one of my favorite ones. Indy on a 60-win pace. Indy on a 60-win pace since January 1st. If they win this, then this will be the first series in 2 years they've beaten a healthy team. They don't beat the Cavs healthy versus healthy. I disagree with that. And then this one was interesting because this actually had a little bit of nuance to it. This guy said, everything is clicking, but both Knicks and Pacers are mid. Pacers are just a better team and hot at the right time. They can win it all and still be a second-round exit next year. I give them credit for the moves they made, but it would also be annoying because they're not that good. They're well-coached and take advantage of their situations. I see them as this generation's LeBronto Raptors, to which I replied, well, that's ironic because Pascal Siakam was technically on those teams the first couple of years, and Pascal is a pivotal player for this Pacer team. But I don't necessarily agree with that notion, but I could see where the guy is coming from. So there's a bunch of ways to look at it.
My thing is, though, like if you're going to say they're not a good team and then be like, they're just really well coached, it's like, well, that's what kind of makes them a really good team. Like that, like wouldn't we say the same thing about Kenny Atkinson? Like if people said the Cavs weren't good, we'd be like, well, look what Kenny Atkinson has done with them. Like, or that was at least our argument during the season.
You talk yourself in circles with this stuff, and then you look at Tyrese Halliburton going out and getting 32, 15, and 12, whatever the hell it was, with 0 turnovers, and then now the next thing on national television the morning after is talking about, is he still a superstar? Like, get the hell out of here, man. Like, stop talking about this crap. And you know what? It generates views and it generates conversation, which is what we want to do. But I'm just so sick and tired of the way that this league gets covered, man.
I get it. And listen, I do think there was a little bit of sleeping on the Pacers. And part of that was because the Cavs earned that, right? Like the Cavs had such a good season that we all kind of sat there and we were like, well, hey, there's no way they're going to lose this series. We think they're a better team. They're so good that we thought it'd at least be like a 7-game series. And if you lose on like a buzzer beater or something, so be it. But I think that there's been a lot of respect paid in over the last week or so to the Pacers for just being a really good team with a really good coach, as that one person pointed out. And I also think too, like just from a completely unbiased, just standpoint of like covering the NBA and covering an NBA team, I think it's been a lot of fun to watch this next chapter of Tyrese Halliburton, from the playoffs beginning, and he's voted the most overrated player in the league by some of his peers, apparently. And then for him to do what he's done in this postseason and just be like purely brilliant in some of these games. I mean, he has 2 triple doubles now in the postseason. Like he had a triple double the other night. Just remarkable stuff. He's a very fun player, I think, to watch. Maybe that's blasphemous to some Cavs fans. I don't really think Cavs fans hate Tyrese Halliburton. I think like the overrated chants during the games that we heard was just kind of like leaning into the storylines about him. But like he's been a lot of fun, and I think he has emerged along with this Pacers team as just there's like this resounding sense I get that everyone is kind of having to tip their cap and just say, you know what, that Pacers team is really good. And I do think on some level that does, for me, from where I stand, I think it does, as you look back on that series, soften how it ended a little bit, because you realize like, okay, this wasn't like the Cavs lost to some unworthy team, if you will. They lost to a team that was probably slept on to an extent and is proving round by round that they are the best team in the East right now. And someone's going to have to knock them off. Maybe it's the Knicks and they come back and pull this thing off in 7 games, but man, like they are proving to you they're the best team in the East right now. And so in that regard, like they deserve the respect. And that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be changes for the Cavs, but it does mean that I think like there's added context to why that series went the way it did.
Added context is important, and I think us as media members and us even just as hoop heads, I like to show a little respect to the opponent that kind of beat you, right?
For sure.
Just flat out beat you. Fans, on the other hand, I think there's a jealousy thing in there, and it's understandable from a fan perspective, because they're like, oh man, these guys really. And with Tyrese, to me, like he went out there and he's not even taking over games per se. He's just playing very smart. He's playing very smart and hitting shots at the big times, at the right times. Like the game winner against the Cavs in game 2 was insane. But you look at that happening the next round in the conference finals in the first game of the series in a comeback from down 18, whatever the hell it was in the fourth quarter. And you get the 2K roll that we talked about on last episode, of course. But I feel like it's just this given credit, it's destiny. Sometimes the ball rolls your way. I think we're going to talk about how luck absolutely plays a factor in the postseason as well. And there is a little bit of that on this side, but you can't all put it onto that. It's
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
the work they've put in. It's the system they play with, and nobody is ready to run with them. I can't wait to see what it looks like against OKC, because this is the funny part. Just like the other games, they're probably going to come in as underdogs. And they've been slept on the whole postseason. We've always kind of just said, all right, the other team's going to totally win the series. Indiana will put a good fight up, but they're not going to win. I can see that going all the way through to a Larry O'Brien trophy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just something about it. And I know that OKC looks like the one, and the way that they play defense, and they just squeeze the life out of you. But I'm curious to see how the Indiana pace matches with OKC's kind of gritty play style. That should be a hell of a finals. And screw anybody that talks about ratings, because I can't wait to see that as a basketball fan. And yes, man, I will say screw you one more time to do that.
There's going to be an interesting conversation to be had about like the ratings thing, because I'm actually really irked by this. This feels like the right platform to do it, but I want to wait till we actually have that as like NBA finals before we talk about it. So that could be something for next week's episode, Spence. But yeah, like, you know, Tyrese has been great. I like that he's leaned into this villain role a little bit too. And, you know, he's been timely with the way he's done things. He's been kind of just like a facilitator when he needs to be, and he's taken over when he needs to be. It's been a lot of fun to watch, and to watch the Pacers become this team has been it's been an enjoyable experience, just from like a basketball, as you said, a basketball head, like somebody who enjoys this game and this sport. And I will too be enjoying an NBA Finals that features those two teams, regardless of the market size. And it does feel like the Pacers' pace is going to be the thing that gives them a chance in any series. That's been the case to this point. And if that happens against the Thunder, like, they could be in for quite the series as well. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But along the lines of that exact thing, the Pacers go in on this great run. And, you know, you look at the four teams that were left in the playoffs for this round, and the number one thing that you can look at and say is about all of them is that they were all healthy at the right time. And so this is where, Spence, I think, you know, we talked about this a little bit after Koby Altman's press conference. Two things can be true. There can be room for this team to develop and grow, the Cavaliers I'm talking about, and there can be changes that maybe need to be made. And I think that's the way where I find the balance in that is with the conversation on just how luck comes into play in the postseason. Because, like, frankly, you had that one person who tweeted you and said, like, healthy versus healthy, I think the Cavs will beat the Pacers. You said you disagree with that, but I do think if the Cavs have been healthy, that series doesn't end in 5 at the very least. Like, I think they definitely, like, it's a closer series than what it obviously seemed like by the end. And maybe they win game 2 and they pull that one out like they should have. Like, there's different things that could have played out. But as I think about health of teams this time of year, there is a luck factor that is always going to that is always going to play a role in any team's chance of winning a championship. And as I think about, like, how that looks like big picture in the NBA, this is where Koby Altman's argument of, listen, Evan's development is key for us. We think there's another level he can get to. You know, and him at least saying that they still view Jared Allen and some of these and all these guys as important to their future. Where I think he is right is that if you look at the Eastern Conference next year, man, the Bucks could be without Giannis. Giannis could be headed west if all these rumors that are swirling are true. Okay, that's one less team that has like a superstar player standing in your way. The Celtics, once the juggernaut that was on, everyone thought they were building this great dynasty and no one was going to beat them for years to come. All of a sudden, they're not going to have Jason Tatum for most of next season. And even when he comes back, an Achilles injury affects your explosiveness. We know that from all sports when that injury happens. Like, there's no guarantee he is going to be like the same Jason Tatum as soon as he just steps back into the lineup. I mean, an Achilles injury kind of derailed KD's career to an extent. Like, he's still a great player, but is he the same KD as before? Probably not. So there's factors here that, as I look big picture at the Eastern Conference, I can understand why Koby maybe feels that way. And if the organization does feel that way kind of approaching this offseason, and they continue to preach patience, as Koby highlighted being something that Dan Gilbert certainly, you know, tries to instill in them, I can see why that makes some sense, because if this Cavaliers team stays healthy, maybe we are talking about a Cavs team that is playing for an NBA Finals. And that is very, very true. Now, where I push back on it is that can't be your only solution, right? You can't just bank on, well, hey, let's run it back next year, because if we stay healthy, we're probably in the NBA Finals, and if guys keep developing, we're probably in the NBA Finals. That can't be the only thing that you're like grasping at, but I do think there's room to believe that anybody who's out there maybe suggesting like they got to blow up everything and trade a bunch of different guys, I think it's smaller tweaks that need to be made to this team. I guess it depends on like your scale of small versus big. Like I guess breaking up some of the core four would be considered a bigger thing. But if you trade like one guy out of the core four, I don't know that that's like a massive change if you're getting somebody you think is going to help you get over the top. So I don't know. I don't view that as like a major change, but I think there are smaller things that need to be done on like this roster. But I also understand like, yes, luck is a factor. And this Cavaliers team, I still believe would have been good enough to win a championship had their health been, up to par this time of year, and it just stinks that happened. And as you look at the landscape of the East, like there is reason to believe that the Cavaliers aren't going to go away, that they're going to be right there with this Pacers team. They're going to be right there with this Knicks team. And there's still going to be there's still going to be an opportunity in the Eastern Conference to emerge in any of these upcoming seasons as the representative in the finals from this conference.
And I think when you talk about changes and the core four and whatnot, you have to at least be open-minded to it, which I feel like they are a little bit more than the past. There's frameworks out there on Twitter that aren't possible with the second apron. You've got the trade machine going, and I know we're going to do an episode with Yossi at some point.
Yeah.
But with breaking up the core four, my obvious pick, if they were to do that, would be Jared Allen going another way, just because of Evan Mobley's development. We got into that a big amount on the last podcast episode, so I won't go too much further into that, but that would be my probably top target if they were to do that. You just got to make sure that you're getting back what you're losing. And that's the rebounding piece of it. That's the good screening. That's the ability to play make out of the role. Like, Jared Allen is a good player, and as I said before, he is an all-star level center. He is very highly coveted around the NBA. No matter what you Cleveland fan think about Jared Allen, he is very highly coveted around the NBA, which is why his trade value should be high. And a lot of this, too, has to do with him being in his last year of this contract before his salary jumps next summer. And then I see the stuff with Darius Garland, and that's the stuff we didn't really talk about last week that I want to get into.
Yeah.
A lot of different frameworks that people have been talking about. Chris Fedor floating the idea of Jalen Suggs and Tristan da Silva in Orlando. I think Darius would be a tremendous fit with the Magic. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know if that's enough. And then there's people, obviously, after the Wolves lost last night, thinking about getting Anthony Edwards, somebody to take some of the load off of him, and Jaden McDaniels comes up, Dante DiVincenzo, so like all that stuff. I don't know why I'm echoing right now, but we'll continue to talk. And I've lost Spence.
Can you hear me?
So now I'm hearing myself.
Do you hear me?
Okay, now we're good. Now we're good. Damn, I was on a roll.
I'm sorry.
Stupid
equipment. I was tweaking something because my mic wasn't. It wasn't the right mic. Anyway, continue. I didn't mean to throw you off there.
You're fine. But yeah, no. So DG with Minnesota also would make sense. But is Jaden McDaniels and Dante DiVincenzo enough, or another one of those guards that has played like Terrence Shannon doing what he did in the playoffs, which I thought was actually pretty impressive for someone with as little experience as him. But I don't think that's enough still. And I feel like the problem that people don't want to accept here, and they just want to look at what everybody else is saying and what the national media is telling them, what the local media is telling them, is that the Cavs lost because they were soft. That was part of it. It wasn't the whole story. You know what the story was? Darius Garland was hurt, and he didn't have the capability to play up to his level. They didn't make open shots, too. There's a real sample size from the regular season to where they were lights out. And then they get to the playoffs and they forget how to make jump shots. It's a real thing. I don't care what you tell me, and you can go down all these different roads about how they need to be more physical, they need to push off the most spots. Like, no, sometimes it doesn't work out because your offense didn't work. And you're telling me the offense is the reason they lost in the playoffs and not the defense? Then I would have called you nuts before the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because they were a well-oiled machine. And in the first round, again, I don't care that the Miami Heat were not that great of a team. You go on the road and you choke the life out of somebody on their own home floor, win by 90-plus points in the first round, and you're telling me that that team needs extreme changes? No. Yeah. So I feel like the Jarrett thing makes the most sense to me. And then you look at, the Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade's potentially changing things on the margins and looking at that stuff. You need a Steven Adams type if you want your backup center to have that toughness to him. But you think that Steven Adams is going to be the reason that the Cavs score a bunch of points? No, it's a mental thing. It's a physical thing, but it's not the main thing. That's what I look at this as. And it bothers me because if you actually watch the film, they had a lot of good looks when Donovan was spraying out to the other side of the floor, and they were just flat out missing shots. And that is part of the equation. It's not the full equation, but it's part of the equation almost as much as the physicality thing, because the Cavs were the more physical team in Game 2 against Indiana. The Cavs were the more physical team against the Pacers on their home floor in Game 3. I was there. I watched it happen.
Yeah.
They didn't sustain it. You have to be able to sustain that physicality, and you have to be able to respond when you get hit. And the Pacers just always kept coming back no matter what happened, including in Game 3, by the way.
For sure.
But the Cavs just have that part of it. They have to sustain, and they have to be able to inbound the basketball or block out on a free throw attempt with 10 seconds left. Those aren't overlying issues that people are talking about. Those are minimal things. But as we know, the devil is in the details.
Yeah, listen, like I can subscribe to the idea that series got away from them for a multitude of reasons, injury being one of them. You lose the first game the way you did, you just kind of got blitzed by them. And there are flaws in the Death Star, Spence. Like there are the concerns of the toughness. I understand they're valid. And that's why I think there are changes that need to be made. I'm somebody who very much prides myself on like balance and just in life in general. And I think that's kind of where I'm at with the evaluation of this Cavs team. I think this playoff run for the Pacers and us tipping the cap to them like we did at the start of the show of, maybe we underestimated them a little bit. I think the landscape of the East that I just laid out previously presents a unique opportunity where it's like, hey, when Donovan Mitchell says we're going to find a way to get over this hump, when he says like we're not going anywhere, we'll be back, when those are comments being made by this team, you can buy those because, look at the East. The East is good. There's going to be a lot of changes potentially that come the way of the Eastern Conference. Like I said, with Giannis maybe changing teams, with the Celtics being where they're at. The 76ers, it seems like their time with Joel Embiid is just going to sort of be soured here, and it doesn't look like there's anything really in their future. So, like, there's so much like opportunity here in the Eastern Conference to still emerge as the rightful champion at some point. And like I don't think you just like throw in the towel on all the entire blueprint just because you lost to the Pacers, who have proven this postseason that they were better than people are giving them credit for. The Cavaliers are still, I think, one of the best 2 to 3 teams in this conference. You could argue that the Knicks are better because they advanced. I think there were certainly circumstances that changed the Celtics outlook. And the Celtics might still be in that conversation next year, even without Jason Tatum, because they're just that good. But they could be in for some changes too. That's the other thing. Like, they're going to be a second apron team. Like, what does that all look like? So I just think in general, like I can wrap my head around Kobe's comments on, we don't have to make wholesale changes, or if we were going to do that, we would have done it last year. And that patience is key, while also still recognizing, because luck is a factor, but also still recognizing that you can't let that be your argument for doing nothing. Like, your argument for doing nothing can't just be like, well, hey, if we get lucky next year, maybe we're in the NBA Finals. Like, it doesn't work like that. So I do think changes need to be made, as we've talked about. And I like you still do point to Jared Allen as the main piece to move. But I think what's interesting from that is the Darius Garland part of this as well.
Yeah, for sure. And being proactive is good, but you want to make sure that you're not overdoing it, because that is the most delicate part of a general manager's job, or as a team president's job, is to make sure that you don't upset the temperature in the locker room. And I know that you can look at the 2 second round exits, and I told you already, I'm not handling this team with kid gloves, but I also keep things a buck, dude. Like, I'm reading the comments, and I love interacting with people. We got to probably throw some up there while we're talking about this. I think these are very relevant to the conversation. My
I'll
guy
work on
Rob, I really appreciate the interaction, even if we disagree sometimes on a lot of stuff. He's one of my favorite guys on Twitter. Really love to talk
Rob,
about
I
him.
think got back to me on my comments like you're looking to get lucky for in the East to be weak, but it's not going to be weak. Like I listen. If you're comparing it to the West, I think the East is going to be weaker than the West. The West is still going to be a gauntlet, and especially if Giannis goes West, I say weak in the terms of like I think there's less teams that you have to sort of worry about standing in your way in the East. But obviously, when you have teams like Indiana, when you have teams like Boston, even without Tatum, when you have the Knicks, yes, like there are still teams that are going to challenge you. And there's teams like Orlando that are probably going to be better once Jalen Suggs is back. There's going to be a team like the Pistons who seem like they're sort of on the rise here when they have some maybe moves up their sleeve. So I'm not saying it's going to be like, you can just coast. But I do think like when the Cavs say these things about like not going anywhere, if they stayed exactly the same, they would still be a contending team in my eyes in this conference because there's a lot of change that is coming.
There is. And multiple comments from Rob, so I appreciate it. This is actually good for us because it's giving us material. This one, we've talked about this before, but I do want to touch on this again because I listened back to all the press conferences from the exit interview, Spence, and I know this was a question that you had too about this squad. Can toughness be learned? Can that be something that you pick up throughout your experiences, or does it have to be inside you? Do you have to have that dog in you? I think it's a little bit of both. I feel like experience is the best teacher and that these things can give you the scars that propel you moving forward. And they have tough guys on their team. They have Max Strus. If you don't think Donovan Mitchell's tough, then you can get right out the door. That guy literally put his team on his back amongst those injuries. Does Evan have a dog in him right now? I think it's starting to come there. I think it's starting to come out, especially when he was healthy. Man, and here's another thing with Evan too. You can't scoff at all NBA second team. Like that is an accomplishment that is insane for somebody who's just finishing their fourth year and saw the Giannis move and all that stuff. Like, shooting is important. Like this should be the name of the podcast today. Shooting is important. I understand that we want guys that can push people around and can set hard screens and respond and maybe throw an elbow to the throat, whatever you want. But shooting is important in today's NBA. You know what else is important? Not having a top-heavy roster. You're supposed to be deep. You're supposed to have guys you can depend on.
The Pacers are a testament to that.
The Pacers are doing that. The Thunder are doing that. I know we always talk about Shea, but can we talk about Alex Caruso, for God's sake? Can we talk about Isaiah Hartenstein? Can we talk about Lou Dort, one of the best defenders in the league? They have so much. Chet Holmgren has been fantastic in the conference finals. You have to have depth. Aaron Wiggins. Let me go further down the list. Isaiah Joe. They've gone to a number of pinches. Like, they have a very deep team. The Pacers, again, Nesmith and Nembhard are two of the top shooting three-pointers in the entire playoffs right now. But everyone talks about Tyrese Halliburton. Miles Turner, probably the most underrated player on that team. Pascal Siakam is a NBA champion who's bringing that experience to this team in his second year with them. First and a half year with them, I guess you could call it, because he was a midseason acquisition last year. But it's not just these big three and you're good. It's not that. It's not like that anymore.
Yeah, the big
it's
three
2025
for sure.
It's 2025.
Yeah, no, the big three era I think is dead and gone. I've felt that way for probably a couple years now. Like that's just not how you win in the NBA anymore. Like I think dating back probably to the Bucks winning the finals, where it was very much, Giannis and Chris Middleton were like the two big guys. I mean, you could throw Drew Holiday in there. It's funny because you gripe so much about like national media narrative, Spence. This is probably one of my least favorite things is when like some team makes a trade and ESPN or whoever throws out this graphic that's like a new big three in whatever city, and it's like, what? Like they did it with the Bucks when they traded for Kyle Kuzma. It was like the Bucks' new big three, and I was like, Kyle Kuzma is part of a big three? That's how we feel about Kyle Kuzma now? And I know how you feel about Kyle Kuzma,
comment.
which makes it even funnier.
Comment.
But yeah, I just like it's like we always try to frame it in these narratives as like you need another superstar on this team, or you need a big three to like. I think that era is dead. So
that era is dead.
Yeah, I like the Pacers are proof that you like depth. It's the same thing with the Thunder. The Pacers and the Thunder are proof that depth is more important, especially this time of year. Like somebody like Neesmith, like he's been playing brilliant. And people just kind of view him as like a role player on the team.
8 out of 9 threes for them in
Dude,
game one.
Yeah.
Tyrese gets all the love for game one, but that's the guy that kept you in the damn thing.
Yeah. Like having role players like that is so valuable, man. And like I agree with you. So that's where I think the Cavs can get better if they are to trade somebody out of this core four. We both agree Jared should be first up on that menu, I guess, of options. But I do think there's been some interesting conversations had about Darius Garland in this regard as well. I know you wanted to get into this a little bit too, and the idea that if they were to make a deal for DG, that there would be some, or if they were to trade DG, that there are some interesting landing spots out there that maybe make some sense. I think you hinted at this a little bit with a couple of the teams you mentioned. But what are the things that you're sort of picking up on, or that you're hearing in terms of, hey, like this team and maybe some of the players that they have to offer would be a fit if DG was something that the Cavs were willing to actually part ways with?
Well, you would have to get back somebody who can set the table and play make. I know that we're getting Evan Mobley to that echelon to where he starts having the ball in his hands more, higher usage.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they're ready to trust him full time as a playmaker like a Jokic, right? Like, can he be a Bam already in terms of like the dribble handoff stuff? Like, he'd have a lot of responsibility. Şengün also does stuff like that, plays from the high post and face-up game and try to set guys up with cuts, which he's good at. But can that be your primary offense? Because Donovan Mitchell dominated the ball in the second round, as we saw. If he had even 60% of Darius Garland in that second round, I think we'd be having a totally different conversation. Because what Darius does is he alleviates pressure by handling the ball, by setting his teammates up, by getting into the paint with his array of dribble moves and side to side and his no-look passes. Like, he can manipulate a defense with his eyes. You don't find many of those in the league anymore because the traditional point guard, again, going back to our theme of burying things, the traditional point guard is dead pretty much. How many are left that don't score and set up teammates? You need to have someone that can set the table for you. And that's what Donovan kind of struggled with in those last couple of games or last 3 games because he was exhausted because the offense was driving into the paint, occasionally kick out to a teammate and then drive to the paint again. So the offense, again, was the issue of that series. I think a healthy Darius Garland makes a huge difference in that series. Do they beat the Pacers? I don't think so. I think we cannot do that what-if scenario after we've seen Indiana just dominate throughout the entire postseason. But I think it changes the calculus a little bit. So Darius's skill set also goes beyond just the playmaking, too. It's the catch-shoot piece of it. He is really good at shooting the ball, and he's good at getting to his spots as well. Kenny Atkinson had him shooting a lot more pull-ups this year. And he's solid at getting to his spots by just kind of maneuvering his way around you. Like, I don't know. The other part of this, too, that I don't appreciate, and especially when we have history of this happening, is Darius is 25 years old. He just finished up his 6th season in the NBA. How is that telling of who a player is going to be? How do you know? Especially when the grade card is incomplete. I know that we're coming on here to talk about trade and whatnot, but I just had my wheel spinning. It just, to me, one, development never stops. Development doesn't stop till you retire.
You're saying, how do we know
how do you know that's who Darius Garland is if he hasn't had the chance to show it while healthy? He had 1.5 playoff series, maybe.
Yeah.
Like,
you talk about luck.
You can't make that conclusion.
Yeah, you talk about luck. Like, he's had the worst luck when it comes to like the postseason stuff. And I get it. Like, you know, Rob's throwing up. You know, Darius is not a big time performer when the lights are bright. I don't know what you're watching, bro. He's a liability on defense and inconsistent. I'm sorry. Listen, like, I get it. I get that that's going to be the criticism when you haven't seen a guy enough at that stage do it. But I also think, to your point, Spence, like, you can't you can't rule out the context here of last year. The jaw injury really hindered him, and then he had lost weight, and he was just kind of constantly playing catch up the entire time. And then by the time the playoffs rolled around, he wasn't there. And then this year, the fluky toe injury that clearly limited his ability. Like those things matter. And so, yeah, like as we talk about luck, like he's had some of the worst luck when it comes to his health in the postseason specifically. So I agree with you. Like there is still more of that story to be written. I get why people are going to be critical and say he can't do it on that stage. I think to your point, it's kind of a TBD thing for me, which is disappointing, but I do think it's a TBD for Darius. We still don't know for sure because he's never really had a chance to do it.
He's not injury prone, Rob. He is not injury prone. He got hit in the face. He's got poked in the eye. He had a toe injury that came up out of nowhere on a closeout. Freak accidents are a real thing. These are not soft tissue injuries.
Donovan had a freak accident at the end of the season with like 2 weeks to go. He fell on a guy's foot, and that's what sort of hurt his quad going into the postseason. So
now, if you want me to play devil's advocate, maybe he's too short, and that's why he had the eye injury, or why he had the jaw injury. The eye injury was because it got gouged by Gary Trent Jr., which he apologized for. You had the closeout, what can you control with that? I just don't know. Like, you go out to contest somebody and you land funky on your foot. Like, are we really going to get mad at him for that? I don't know what else you can do. If it's something to where he's being overused, or there's some sort of tendonitis or whatever like that, then sure, he'd be injury prone. But he's not injury prone if he gets hit in the face. He's not injury prone if he lands wrong on his foot. That's not injury prone. That's literally bad luck. I know that he's not got the strongest frame, and that's something that he has to improve at. But I actually, this is one of the talking points that I agree with Koby. Steph Curry, body-wise, not skill-wise, not comparing games, don't take it that direction, but body-wise, very similar. And he had issues with injuries earlier that were injury-prone type stuff. And he ended up making it out fine. And look at that guy now. So, I don't know, forgive me for wanting to be patient with one of the most dynamic and talented point guards in the NBA. I just don't see why you would give up on that right now when he's 25.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I also think, too, the notion that Darius can't play in the playoffs because he can't defend, I think gets overblown to an extent. Now, listen, if your argument is like him and Donovan together are both a liability, I get that one. But every team, like, look around. Every team is not like all these really good teams. It's not like perfectly 5 guys on the floor that are both great on offense and great on defense. Like that is, I don't know. Has there ever been a team, Spence, that's been like has just 5 two-way players on it, like on every position? Like that just doesn't exist in the NBA, really. And then the Pacers might be close to that, but like Pascal Siakam's like right around league average for his defensive rating. Tyrese Halliburton, I think, is worse than the league average for defensive rating. Like these guys aren't necessarily like elite defenders either. They just play at a style that like wears guys out, and that helps on the defensive end. But also like they get the timely stops and moments. And again, going back to the Darius factor of this, like you didn't get a chance to see him and how effective he could or couldn't be on defense because he was injured. So I think that all comes into play. Real quick before we wrap up, off of this Darius conversation, do you think that Donovan would be better suited to just be an off-ball shooting guard and not handle the ball and let Darius, or if they were to trade for another person that handled the ball, be the primary guy handling the ball? Because we know Donovan is great when he handles the ball, and we know that he's, mixed and matched in that way with him and Darius both kind of being the main ball handlers. But if they took that away from him a little bit and maybe gave it to Evan Mobley even, and he had more opportunities to bring the ball up the floor, do you think that is something that would suit Donovan's game? Is that a fit for him, or does he need to have the ball in his hands more, you think, as the primary guy?
I'm going to go back to the word that you use, balance. You can't just make him an off-ball guy.
Okay.
But it's something like what we just saw in the regular season and what we saw in round 1 against Miami. You're not completely off the ball, but you can take possessions off. And you can trust Evan Mobley to bring it up. You can trust Darius Garland to bring it up. Ty Jerome. Whoever one of these point guards or guards bringing the ball up. Shoot, Max Strus in some possessions when he was using the pick and roll with Jarrett Allen was handling the ball. So you just can't bring it up 50% of the time. That was his usage rate in that game 2 against the Pacers. It was above 50%. It was out of this world, unreal. I don't think it even happened with LeBron when he was on the Cavs. That was too much of a workload on Donovan Mitchell in that point. So you obviously can't have that. But you don't want to completely take it out of his hands because he's extremely effective when he drives the lane. You want to get him the ball with momentum. If he wants to break someone down in an ISO situation, go ahead. ISO is going to happen in the NBA. You can't just have Harlem Globetrotter ball throughout 48 minutes. It's not going to happen. Sorry, go to your local YMCA. I'm sure that you can see some of that too. But it's not going to happen every single time. But yes, you do want him off the ball in certain situations. You want Darius off the ball in certain situations because that means Evan has the ball in his hands. You want Max Strus curling around. You want whoever's on your team that can play off ball with somebody else facilitating and figuring out the offense, especially in the half court, because the half court's where things slow down and you got to be able to figure it out. And that's where I thought the Cavs had it figured out because they had every style in the book they were good at. They were good in transition. They were good at slowing it down. They were good in that middle pace area. In the playoffs, clearly, when the injuries came, but also Donovan Mitchell was just way too ball dominant. That was where their downfall came. And the rhythm was kind of gone. And if you go back and you watch Donovan Mitchell's press conference, someone asked him about that. Did you put too much on your shoulders in that series? And I just tweeted out a video of it yesterday. His quote was like, there's reasons. I'm not going to just abandon what we're doing. So I found that really interesting because that leads me to believe that
I missed
Evan,
that in real time. Yeah.
That leads me to believe that Evan was more hurt than he was. That leads me to believe that Darius Garland, already knowing how hurt he was even worse with that foot injury. So that tells me that Donovan is self-aware. I've got all the respect in knowing his knowledge of the game and what he's capable of, and he'll admit his faults. But if he didn't admit fault there, then that tells me that those guys really were hurt. So that's also part of this.
I think this is a great comment from Rob to end on. We better sign Jerome back or we'll be doomed. I think the notion that Ty Jerome, that the team was better with Ty Jerome than Darius got put to bed in that Pacers series because Ty Jerome was looked at as needing to step up and be a starter in those moments, and he sort of laid an egg for most of that series until the last game. And that's no disrespect to Ty Jerome. I think he's a fine player. If they brought him back, I think it'd be worth it. Again, we talked about depth. He's a great piece to have in terms of depth, but the team lost in 5 games with Darius Garland not out there and hurt, and they had Ty Jerome filling in, and I think we sort of saw the evidence that no, they're probably not a better team with just Ty Jerome and no Darius, but just saying. I also was going to throw this one up there because Beast Girl says a Midwest and Southwest NBA Finals potentially on tap here.
Beautiful thing.
Spence and I said we're for it, and I think that's actually a good topic to get into on the next episode. I hope we can get Yossi at some point because I do want to talk through some cap stuff with him and the second apron and what this all looks like for the Cavs. So we have that planned for an episode here coming down the pike. But I do, once this finals is potentially set, we don't know what's going to happen between the Pacers and the Knicks tonight. I want to talk about it because I have some thoughts on all these people who griped for years that the NBA has no parity, and now that they have parity, they're mad that the New Yorks and the Bostons and the Lakers and the Los Angeleses of the world aren't actually in the NBA Finals. So we'll have that for you coming up next week on another episode of Courtside with the Cavs on SI. In the meantime, I implore you to head on over to Cavaliers on SI, the website, si.com/NBA/Cavaliers. Check out any of our written content. We'll post this podcast episode up there as well. And of course, stay locked in at the YouTube channel right here with the Cavaliers on SI. All those press conferences that Spencer alluded to. It's always good to go back and listen to them because sometimes you hear things that you might have missed in the moment. As Spence mentioned, as I said, I kind of caught on to a couple things as well. So check those out. Check out other episodes of the podcast. Our last episode did pretty well in terms of people engaging because they were upset about some of our trade ideas that we threw out there. But we appreciate you as always. Thanks for following along. Keep on following along with Courtside with the Cavs on SI. And, of course, the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI.